Welcome to Conversations. My name is Jason Plotkin, and I am the Program Director at Congregation Emanu. On select Wednesdays during our conversation series, we sit down with a member of the congregation, community, or perhaps even from the sports world to discuss the current state of affairs. In a moment, we'll introduce our guests. I do want to start off by saying when I originally set up today's conversation, we were set for mid-February, and we're going to focus a lot on what the Greater Houston Restaurant Association is doing to help educate, advocate, and share resources amongst its restaurants during this challenging time, as well as get a glimpse into the future of the restaurant industry in Houston going forward. We'll cover that, but obviously, since that time, we had a winter storm that has devastated the Houston area, and most service providers, including restaurants, have been put in the spotlight due to changes made by the governor related to capacity and mask wearing. I should add, we are recording this on Friday, so it will air in a few days. And of course, things are changing around us. I'll probably bring that up a few times, but just for some clarity. To help us cover all the bases I mentioned, we're going to welcome Melissa Stewart, the Executive Director of the GHRA. Melissa, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Well, we are so excited to have you and appreciate you helping reschedule this. But before we dive in, I always like to ask our guests for a little background. What led you to your current role at GHRA? Tell us a bit about yourself so we can set the stage, if you will.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. So I think probably the biggest thing that brought me to the association is my favorite thing about me, which is I'm a Houston girl, born and raised. So I've been here all my life. I've had jobs that have taken me all over the country, but I always land back in Houston for the weekend to, settle in. I've been with the Restaurant Association since 2013. It was just a great opportunity. An opening came up at the same time I was looking. And it's just been amazing to me because I love Houston. I love our diversity. I love our food scene. And it's just been a really neat opportunity to fill it with passions that I love, but also to meet all the cool people. I mean, there's just something to meeting Mr. Molina of Molinas or Mr. Pappas of Pappas. I mean, that's just cool. Personally, I live up in the Champions area with my husband and my daughter. She's 10 going on, 56. I mean, I'm not sure. It's crazy. We have 4 rescue dogs that will hopefully all stay asleep while we are doing this. They are Buttercup, Jane, Millie, and Vendetta, because I like to stand in the backyard and yell Vendetta because it makes the neighbors nervous. And, but, just in general, I'm happy to be here. I love our city and just anything we can do to help everyone know how fantastic we are.
Well, I appreciate that. I should add that when I was doing these in my home office, my cat Sammy would always make an appearance. So we are used to animal appearances. No questions there. And I also want to, for those who are watching who are familiar with Congregation Emanu, Melissa's actually been a judge in the Houston chicken soup cook-off that we have done historically that maybe we'll bring back at some point. But Melissa, the GHRA, the Greater Houston Restaurant Association, you're the executive director. Give us some high-in-the-sky view of what the GHRA is and what your role specifically is for those who are not familiar.
Sure. So the Greater Houston Restaurant Association is a trade association. We are a chapter that's wholly part of the Texas Restaurant Association. So the Texas Restaurant Association has 22 chapters across the state. And our primary role and goal when we were founded about 80 years ago was really about advocacy, because restaurants, just like a lot of professionals, you end up being very siloed. And so when you need to impact change at a government level, whether it be city, state, national, it helps to come together with a single voice and speak loudly with that voice. So advocacy was what we originally started with, but we're so much more now. We really work, advocacy is still primary, but we do education, we do workforce development. Sometimes we just provide the space for restaurant operators to speak with each other and to learn about new products and technology. You'll also may be aware of the National Restaurant Association. It is a separate entity, but we have a partnership with them. So anybody who joins us here at the Houston level, their membership is actually a 3-in-1 because it takes care of the Houston chapter, the state, and the national chapter for our restaurants. So it's pretty exciting. Right now, I can tell you just it changes always what we're doing. But in the last couple of weeks, we have visited our elected officials up in Austin to advocate for our legislative agenda, which would include keeping cocktails to go, because that's been really a fun thing that came out of this. I'm always looking for the silver lining of the year-long pandemic. But also education. A lot of tax rules have changed, so we've got webinars being planned. So member education, we're trying to work with the city. That's why I was just before you and I jumped on, and just everything we can. How do we take maybe these CARES monies that are coming in and give them to restaurants that are struggling to feed our people who are struggling? So like, how do we really maximize efforts? And, in the emergencies, we talk a lot about with the city. When we have a weather emergency in particular, the first person you call is the first responders, EMTs, police, firemen. But restaurants are your second phone call, because while everyone's out and about, they've got to be fed. And so we're really trying to keep working so that we can be a more impactful and planned resource when we have those emergencies. So they just, depending on the day, will depend on what we're doing, but it's always for restaurants and it's always for our city.
Well, lately it's been a lot of active days, so I definitely get that. Let's start with COVID, and then we'll get into the winter storm and some of the other things going on. One thing I think we all know is that industry is impacted. Restaurants, particularly, a lot of people are doing drive-in or carry out. You brought up the cocktails to go. Can you give us a snapshot of how COVID's impacting the restaurant industry here locally? What is the word amongst your restauranteers about the impact on the revenue and staffing, as we've now just passed the 1-year milestone of this thing?
Well, what's exciting is we are just like our city, it's really diverse. So it kind of depends on who we're talking about. So if we're talking about a restaurant that in January of 2020 had drive-through service, they're doing pretty good. Or if they already had like a really good delivery service, maybe we always think of Chinese restaurants or pizza restaurants, their model really pivoted well to the pandemic. Where we've seen a lot more struggle is what I would consider our event restaurants, whether it's a caterer or that one restaurant you always go to because you love it, and this is where he proposed to you, and every year you go back for your anniversary, or this is where all the graduates go, or things like that. So the fancier dinners have had a harder time because they don't really pivot to curbside and delivery and to go as easily. So, one of the things we've had to really help restaurants understand, and our guests as well, is not everything travels. So that really beautiful cut of steak with the pommes frites and the wine and all that, maybe just fantastic. And you write that big old check at the end to pay the bill, and you just had the best time and it was all wonderful. But you take that same food and dump it in a plastic to-go container, drive it for 20 minutes, and then try and replate it. It's gone. But the cost of that operation didn't really necessarily change. So we've really just seen a lot of challenges depending on the restaurant and the concept on how they pivoted. Now, we've seen some great pivots though. So I use Brennan's because I'm really familiar with them, and Alex, Brennan Martin is a great partner to the association and the city. But they've done some really interesting things, because when you think of them, they're sort of that event meal, right? They're the business lunch or the anniversary meal, Sunday brunch for the family. So how do you take that concept when you're at limited capacity, really trying to keep your employees and your customers safe, and deal with it? So they've done some really great things like virtual classes where you come and you pick up maybe a tasting menu, and then the chef goes on screen and everyone gets together at the same time and you enjoy that. Or they, instead of doing small individual meals, they've created family packs. And I know we've taken advantage of some of those at a lot of, we've taken advantage of them at a lot of restaurants, but they did a fried chicken pack at one point. I'm like, yes, that's what we want. And so it was wonderful. It was a great way to do that. Brennan's has also taken advantage of some of the waivers from the governor and gotten their food into our grocery stores. So Kroger's and HEB have partnered with restaurants all over the city to have individual heat and eat meals there. And that's been a great bonus, because for a lot of our community, you really only want to make one stop. And that one stop is, either grocery store or restaurant, but maybe not both. So restaurants being able to be in the grocery stores helps, and then the restaurants acting as a grocery store. Many of us will remember when this first happened and we were all trying to get our bubble set, the grocery stores were empty, and it was weird what was out of stock. Like Beans, that's not too weird, but then there's things like macaroni and cheese and canned soup. And, so the grocery stores were able to really come in and help, because as we learned, the distribution channels that get food to a grocery store are not the same as the distribution channels that get food to a restaurant. They're just not packaged the same. They're not labeled the same. So we were able to use waivers for the restaurants to take their distribution channel and create these boxes of produce and eggs and toilet paper. We had a lot of promotions this time last year with buy a meal, get a free roll of toilet paper in your to-go box. And those were very popular, I will say. So when we start talking, so those are kind of like the positives and the high notes that we're trying. But unfortunately, the reality is our industry has lost at least, give or take, 14% of our standing restaurants. And lots of things went into this. One is, some of them were maybe operating, restaurants always operate lean, and we know that. And so what we've seen is that some of those restaurants, when they got shut down with an uncertain when we reopened, made the hard decision earlier than later to go ahead and step back. We had other restaurants that held on, but then as this went on and on and on and on, they still had rent due. They still had insurance fees. They, all the things that still cost money. They just didn't have the customers to be able to support it. We also had some businesses that said, you know what, we were thinking about retiring. And, we've been wondering, when's the right time? And this sort of became the right time. And we saw that, I think, with some iconic Houston restaurants like Patronella's and Barry's Pizza. I mean, those are ones that have been around forever. And this sort of made a hard decision a little bit easier because there was a catalyst to the moment. And then, you always, anytime in business, when you have an opportunity and you're really trying to evaluate how your resources are being spent, the one unit that maybe wasn't doing really well, but collectively everybody was doing okay, it was all right. But when everyone's struggling, maybe you can't support that one unit anymore. This then, and I know I'm just talking forever, but then we go on to the employees. So in our greater Houston area, pre-pandemic, we were looking at about 13,000 restaurants, 250 to 300,000 employees. And so we've had our employees displaced, not only because their hours were reduced or public transportation wasn't available. So lots of factors have really hit our workforce very, very hard, including things like if you have a young child and there's no daycare and there's no school, somebody's got to take care of them. Or if you're in a household that's maybe a multi-generational household or has somebody that is immunocompromised, it might not have been the best decision for your family. May have been that nobody works outside the house. And unfortunately, you really can't telecommute restaurant jobs. So we've struggled, our employees have struggled, and I think part of our recovery is going to be a real challenge.
So I certainly appreciate the reasons why individuals, can't work. I have a 5-year-old and I was home when school was out for a while. So I completely understand that. You earlier brought up education and advocacy. I think one thing I've learned during COVID is that, we're partnering and learning stuff from other people who are going through what we're going through. We're all nationally going through the same thing, and we might be at different locations in that process. So what opportunities and platforms exist for fellow restaurateurs to share similar information locally? I mean, you brought up earlier, they're sharing vendor information. I mean, is there an active platform that they're sharing this information on? What are you guys facilitating?
Sure. So we initially, we have an app. So let me just say the platform is our app where there's message boards where people can reach out directly and go back and forth. Depending on the chapter and the time, we started trying to do some Zoom things, and then everybody was so darn burnt out on Zoom that we killed that. Plus, I would say what makes a great restaurateur is somebody who does not want to sit in front of a computer. That's the whole reason they probably are a restaurateur. They want to be out with people, and they didn't want to sit at a desk all day. So that's been a little bit harder for us to manage from that. But our members, and early on in the pandemic, for about the first 6 months, we took down all our paywalls so that we could just help the community and the industry far and wide. But we did a couple of things. One, you could join at the time. You could have joined the app without being a member. because it is a members only benefit typically. But we also were doing nightly newsletters that are down to about 3 times a week, and they just covered everything we had. Here's what the governor said. Here's what we're seeing from the federal. Here's the rules. Here's some lawsuits. Here's some education, like whatever. Just really trying to open up communication and being as transparent as an association as we could be, and sharing best practices and things that worked really well. So it could be everything from Tyson has done a couple of different food drops where they provided food to restaurant employees that we've helped organize, or mask giveaways, or also opportunities like the city of Houston did a bid late last year to help feed people using some of their CARES money. And so we helped kind of get that messaging out. So, you know, we just like any group, everybody's going to receive information differently. We've really tried. I would say our most effective thing has been the emails, our email newsletters, because then you can get them when you're ready for it. But there's nothing we haven't tried. We're always trying to get the information out there.
Speaking of trying things, a few months ago, I had Sarah Brook of Dessert Gallery on with me, and she's a member of our community. And, you know, we talked about breaking away from the traditional norms, and she brought up the need of the industry to embrace technology. You earlier brought up the restaurants that were able to do successful already had the tradition of carrying out and easy to transfer food, while some of the fancier places or more expensive meal tickets, you know, had to really figure out things. So what are some of the things that the restaurant industry is having to embrace, if you will, going forward? This is a long game. This is not a short game with COVID, as I try to always stress, because things are going to be a little different going forward. So what do you think?
So I think some of the changes we've seen maybe were going to happen anyhow, but just maybe not so fast. So like we knew that there was already a consumer trend towards more carry out and delivery. Certainly delivery. Curbside really hit us strong and hard. So we found a lot of restaurants had to adapt to that very quickly. And then we've had to learn lessons, because anytime you adopt something really fast, chances are you didn't have everything quite right. So, you know, many of our restaurants started working with third-party delivery companies that they never wanted to work with before. And not all of those partnerships have worked out well. So we've had to refigure that. But technology is probably the biggest thing. Restaurants work on a very lean margin. This is not a magic news to anybody. And so when to make the investment, it may not even seem like that much, but to do an online ordering or menu type ordering and all the different things that have to start working together to make that effective, it can be not only a cost for dollars, but think about our restaurateurs. Again, these are chefs, these are artists, these are people. They are not IT people usually. So technology is always something that our restaurants want very, very much, don't exactly understand, and usually have to get forced into it. And we've been forced into it. So I would say almost every restaurant that has continued to do decent, or, you know, kind of hold on, they've really had to adapt to some type of extra technology. It may just even be a website with just a splash screen that says we're open, call here. Or here's our menu, call and pick up at the curbside. So not everything's been super fancy, but we've seen some really good adaptions, and, you know, things where the ordering system gets really nicely integrated, the team can figure it out. And these are things that I think we'll see going forward. So I hope, in addition to some of the waivers and stuff, but I do think that consumers being able to easily order online and do like a curbside pickup, which saves the delivery, it kind of protects the food getting straight to your house quickly. I think people are going to really like that. And also there's been some labor shortages. So I think, again, the technology is starting to get better and better for some of the things that you can easily replace a human with. And this is the most repetitive stuff: cracking eggs, chopping lettuce, stuff like that. Some of the offsite ordering where you don't have to call and get a hostess, where you can do it online. Some of those adaptations were probably coming, but they've really sped up and they'll stay with us.
You know, I hate to admit, I've probably downloaded a few more apps than I probably need and created accounts. So I am definitely taking advantage of the technology and much appreciative. Shifting to the recent winter storm, which obviously wasn't something we were planning to talk about before when we scheduled this, but the winter storm happened in February, and, you know, we had challenges with water and power. Obviously, employees we brought up earlier, there's already challenges in getting them safely to work, but even more so during something like this, and situations at everyone's own home certainly a challenge. So I always like to pull back the curtain when I can. This was an unusual situation by Houston. We're used to hurricanes, we're used to flood events. This was really out of the ordinary. What were some of the immediate impacts, maybe needs you saw from the restaurant folks in town, and perhaps some of the long-term things we might see? Are people going to all start getting generators or figuring out different things with water?
Well, this one, we have, like, once a year, we have this unprecedented weather event, right? But I just think several factors went into this being extra hard, because Houstonians know it doesn't, I joke with people, I'm like, we can't drive in cold weather, forget the ice. Like, if it gets a certain amount of cold, we still can't drive. We just don't know how to deal with it. Our infrastructure is in no way designed for it. We can take 20 inches of rain pretty easy, but a quarter inch of ice or sleet and we are shut down. So I think, even though our forecasters were doing, their best job, going, it's going to be bad, it's going to be bad. We're like, it won't be. We didn't think it was going to be a week's worth of bad. And we certainly didn't expect the combination of the power problem plus the water problems. Like, those all kind of came, you just had that escalating event. I would say for restaurants, some of the hardest things were the unpredictability of the brownouts, because we're in the health and safety business. And so at home, if your power was out and you didn't open your refrigerator, you could probably go and smell your milk and say, yeah, it's all right, it's fine. But restaurants, that's not an option. There's very strict protocols that if it's been below this temperature for this amount of time, it's garbage. And so, because when you couple the weather, the street conditions, and this unpredictable power, it made it hard to not only do business for customers, but to even where restaurants usually step up and can just donate out that food. It's like, I don't want to throw it away. Let me at least donate it to a shelter, the fire department, or whatever. And that wasn't really possible because we couldn't get there before we had to get rid of the food. And then, because it was such an unpredictable power situation, a lot of our operators were like, I'm not restocking until we're situated. And in order to run a lot of businesses, but I'll say for a restaurant, if you think about it, you've got to have food, water, people, electricity, internet. So, there's a lot of things that you have to have that we just didn't have, or we didn't have all of them at once. So it was a really big challenge. I think when you say, what do we learn about it? I think we need to continue as a community, and I see us doing this, but we have to take, when we start hearing a major weather event, we need to think consistently, if this was another Harvey level, what does that do? The judge, when she said that, everyone was like, oh, that's not right. But she was right. She called it. And so I think we're just going to have to be a little bit more pragmatic on these things, and just recognize, does that mean reducing your inventory, increasing your inventory, staging things a little bit differently? Hopefully, as a community, we don't have the same problem twice. But that's also its own kind of problem, right? Then you can't plan for it. So it's a little bit of both. But during the weather thing, I think what we just really learned, I don't know that we're going to see the generators. They make sense for some, but not others. It's a very big expense. It's a space issue. If you've ever been to the back of a restaurant, they're snug. So there may not be a space thing. It may not be your option. If you don't own your building or own your space, if you're in a leasing situation, that might not be an option either. So these are the things where we've got to really work with our partners. And this is, the advocacy issues, what happened that we could have been better prepared for if we had had better partnerships or infrastructure or whatever. And what's the long look for that? So it surprised us, but we'll be better next time, hopefully.
All right. And as we're recording this, we're only a few days into the mask mandate, and we'll be at a week by the time this airs. So the mask mandate being removed and changing capacity by the governor, and really, I feel, thrust businesses and restaurants into taking a side, if you will. I think that was a big challenge, and not all of us have PR people or PR backgrounds or know how to manage that kind of thing. How has the GHRA aided restaurants in navigating their options? You brought up the email earlier that educates people on what the governor says, the county judge, et cetera. But how has the GHRA really helped navigate the options and given restaurants some advice?
So I think the biggest thing is that we want to start with as we do everything, is to remind people we are in the hospitality business. What can we do to create that good experience? What does that look like? But before we can create that great experience, how did we protect our workers? How did we take care of, our family, right? So the association, from a tactical level, early on, we put out what was called the Texas Restaurant Promise. And it said, this is what we're going to do as a restaurant to protect you, consumer. And consumer, this is what we need you to do to protect us. And so when the restrictions lifted, we did some surveying. We found that in excess of 70% of our restaurants were going to continue to mandate that their employees wear masks. And then there was kind of a split somewhat on geography. I would say the bigger cities, more of the restaurants really expected their customers to wear masks, at least until they were at the table. Some of the, I guess, country or, less densely populated parts of the state, it just wasn't the same. They didn't have the same feeling. So what we've advised is that make the best decision based on your constituents. And your constituents are you, your staff, your community. The decisions that a restaurant in the Heights is going to make is probably very different than a restaurant up in Conroe might make, because they're just different folks. And then beyond that, when talking with restaurateurs and, just really trying to, what's the graceful option? How do we take care of it? Restaurants, frankly, are somewhat luckier in this challenge, because the rule has always been once you sat down, you could take your mask off to eat and drink. So the amount of time that somebody might be in conflict with the management's desire to be masked is limited. So that you can kind of quickly address that issue. But it all has to do with customers' grace. And, we know how to de-escalate things. It was, as many people have said, when there was just a statewide rule, everybody do the same thing, it's easier to manage because it's just the law. It's not my hostess saying you have to wear a mask, it's the governor. And so when it came back down, to an individual business's decision, that's just hard, because now every business has its own enforcement group, and that's a lot to put up with, especially for something that became, unfortunately and unnecessarily, very politicized. And we ask for grace from everybody, and that's our best option on that.
Yeah, I think that's the best you can do. Another question related to the state. We're currently in a session of the Texas legislature. For those who are not familiar, the Texas legislature meets every other year. It's kind of unusual compared to a lot of states for those who just don't pay attention to that kind of stuff. But they meet in Austin every other year, unless there's a special session. So you brought up the waivers, you brought up cocktails to go. What are some of these pressing issues of the Texas restaurant community that we should be aware of? I think as a patron, that's awesome if some of these waivers, putting the food in the grocery stores, having cocktails to go. I'm sure, having lived in Louisiana, I know that's a big thing for that community. What are some of these things you are looking to see?
Sure. Now, one of the things that I will just add on to your civics lesson is the Texas legislature is really designed to kill bills, not pass bills. It is much easier to defeat something than to get it through. And with that in mind, we always know that we're going to it's going to be a challenge to get our priorities through in a normal year. But then this year, you've got COVID. Now we have the winter freeze because, we didn't have enough going on. We have budget issues, we have education issues, and we have redistricting. So this was going to be an insane session, and probably special sessions, even without any of that. So our goals this time were to really work on things that have helped create new revenue streams for restaurants and our partners during the pandemic that we'd like to see made permanent. And then also just some consensus things. So we talked about the waivers. So we'd like to have cocktails to go as a permanent thing. The way the rules were set up, it's actually, I think, much safer than even just walking into a liquor store and buying a bottle, because it has to be sealed. It can't be by where you can get it. It's not even supposed to be in the driving part of the car, or the where you have passengers, excuse me. So, I think that's a great option, and it's a good option for a couple of things. One is, I take a family like mine, or maybe yours, Jason, where, I love to eat out. I do enjoy having a drink with dinner, but for my husband and I, to go out with the kid and, then you're driving, and that's a whole problem. we do like to go home, but to be able to bring a half gallon of margaritas home, that's an exciting, fun thing. And, we've taken advantage of that. But the great thing is we're home, we're seated, we're not going back out, and we're off the road. So there's some really nice safety features there, I think. For the restaurants, it's great because to go and delivery is very helpful financially, but you're missing out on some of that extra stuff. So, the meal that was probably $50 in food and $50 in cocktails, now you just got the food part. So to be able to keep that revenue stream is great. So, okay, alcohol to go, waivers that we have for the government, those are good things. Anytime we as a government do something fast, we usually make a mistake. Not a big one, but there's like those little technical things. Often what you'll see is when the law passes, the law may pass in June, but it doesn't go into effect till September 1. That interim time is when the agencies go back through and with a fine tooth comb, read through and say, okay, what about this? What about this? Here are the rules, and they get it all fixed. We haven't had time for that. We've had to, we're building the plane while we're flying it, right? So we've had some unintended consequences from some of the federal monies and relief monies that we all needed as businesses. One of them was the PPP. There was a tax deductibility issue. And so the way it came in, it looks like revenue or income. And we wanted to make sure that you couldn't put your franchise tax on top of that or some of the other things that number is used for. So we're having to do a fix there. On third parties, we talked a little bit about this. We're not trying to regulate pricing. We think that is still free enterprise and we need to work directly with our partners. But there's some bad operators out there. And that's just the plain old truth. We have third-party delivery groups that will take your menu, scan in your intellectual property, change the prices, and then offer to deliver it. And if you look online, you'll go, oh, I wanted Gringos. So I just type in Gringos delivery. Well, a lot of times the first thing that pops up might be a vendor who has paid to be at the top of the list, but it's not necessarily Gringos. And it might not even be somebody that they have a relationship with. And so you order as a customer thinking you're talking to your guy up the street and you're doing a great thing. And, the business is great. But what it really is a third party who calls and acts just like a customer. And there's no transparency. There's a real challenge with if there's a problem, who does it go back on? So we have a third party delivery bill that we're putting through. We're working with third party companies, Uber Eats and DoorDash, Favor, so that we're all kind of on the same page. And these are the rules. This is how you get into a relationship together to partner. If you're not in agreement, here's what has to happen to get out of it. And just so that we can really address and have some legal ramifications for the bad operators. I mean, that's not fair. We don't want to control your business or your money, but we think everyone should be fair.
All right, as I get to the end of the conversation, I always like to ask our guests for a positive story that resonates. This has been a weird year of COVID, but there's certainly things personally or professionally that really make the heart melt, really encourages people to keep working, doing what they're doing. Is there something that you have been familiar of a restaurant or organization rising to the occasion perhaps during this last year that you can think of that you'd be willing to share with us?
So, there's so many stories, and I usually find I tend to demur away from these because I don't want to highlight somebody and then miss somebody else. So let me just say, if there's a restaurant that's still in business, they've done something above and beyond. I can guarantee you that. I don't even know exactly what it is, but I will share one kind of. I love this story because it's innovative and it's helpful and it's everyone working together. So one of our members, Dish Society, and they have units all over, and they continue to do a lot of innovative stuff. Very quickly, and these are some of my really good tech savvy operators, they made some pivots and they added for their curbside. So they got reorganized to be able to do really good curbside delivery, really efficient for their customers. But they added grocery boxes, which was great, and they added the opportunity for their customers to pay for meals for first responders or hospital workers. And so it was just this great partnership where a consumer could come up and with one order, online, because they were actually really, like I said, very tech savvy, you could get your food for that meal. You could get a box of groceries and really good stuff to go home with you. And you could buy some other meals for somebody else. And so it helped them to feed the community and their customers help fund it. And it was just a really good way to keep people employed, to keep the kitchens busy, and to feed people way above and beyond. But I mean, truly, I'm pointing them out just because there's so many little intricacies there, and the community really stepped up and bought lots and lots and lots. I mean, thousands of meals have come out of that. But they're unique in a way, but they're not really. I could tell you, like I said, every operator has done something, whether it was gimme foods, or every time they've been asked for something, they've stepped up and gotten it delivered. And I'm always proud of our community. But again, there's just so many things that I can see throughout Houston, Houstonians just doing their best to take care of each other. And I think we'll see some more of that as we move forward.
Yeah, it's always really nice to see when restaurants help with, particularly the first responders, which I think we've seen during the winter storm and COVID. It's been really nice to see. Lastly, I enjoy putting my PR hat on and always giving our guests a chance to tell us how to learn more about their organization or whatever entity they're representing. For those who are watching on Facebook or YouTube, I will include this so it's easy to find. Melissa, the floor is yours to tell us how to learn more about the GHRA.
Well, fantastic. So GHRA, we do have our own website. It's just GHRA.com. You're welcome to come to that. You'll find stuff if you're interested in the food industry or our local, what we're doing. We have programs throughout the year. We've had scholarships. I mean, there's lots of fun stuff there. But I would also really want to encourage everyone, especially if you're in the restaurant industry or a supplier to it, if you have not visited txrestaurant.org, and that's our state association's main website, there's so much helpful stuff there. And I would say if you're in business, it's maybe worth just going and looking anyhow, because we really gathered a lot of things from the Workforce Commission and tax experts and cleaning experts and all sorts of stuff. And at txrestaurant.org, our pandemic directory, it's just all there and it's available to you. So most everything you can get, not everything's behind a paywall. It's just really accessible because we want our community to be taken care of. And just, the last thing I would just say is this has been hard. Some of your favorite dishes aren't on the menu for all sorts of reasons. They hopefully will come back. We're struggling in a whole bunch of different ways. We all are, everybody individually and collectively. So anything you can do, if a meal wasn't great, obviously step up, speak out, but there's a lot of stuff that goes into that may be causing a problem. Give us a chance to fix it. Just if we can all work in this together, we will continue to move through the tunnel into the light.
Well, I think that is a beautiful way to end it. Melissa, thank you for coming on today and educating us. This was really nice. Thank you.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. So again, thanks to Melissa for coming on. David Tanner behind the scenes, always doing what he does to make sure we get these on the air. Always, as you know, be on the lookout for future communications about future episodes. We'll always put that out to our congregation on our website. And if you've missed any episode, I think we've done almost 40 of these now. You can catch anything you've missed on our YouTube channel, the Emanu YouTube channel. There's a playlist specifically for conversations. And again, thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time. Have a great day, everybody.